What's up guys, welcome back to Newswave. When the GameCube was first revealed as a Switch 2 only system for NSO, there were a lot of questions if the GameCube could actually still run on the Switch 1. Well, now we kind of have our answer through way of the modding community. I figure we take a look at that here today. Also, we did have another big 2026 game revealed. Yes, one of the worst kept secrets coming out of Ubisoft, and it looks pretty good. We'll go over all the features and stuff for Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced here today. And we also have our first look at sales for Tomodachi Life coming out of Japan, and go figure, seems like it might be a bit of a system seller, just maybe not the system that people were expecting. All of that and more. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members for the channel do get Newswave early. If you would like to learn more about that, click the join button or link in the description down below. And we're gonna start today with The Crew 2. You probably didn't see that one coming, but there is a bit of an update that was pushed that actually falls in line nicely with what Stop Killing Games has been really pushing for. The idea of these live service, always online games to have some sort of end of life plan with an offline mode, because you can see, this is over on their social media account for The Crew, saying you've spoken, we've listened to the improvements you've been asking for. With the help of your feedback, the Crew 2 hybrid mode update is here. Thank you for all your patience while the team has been working on this. What is that? Well, essentially, yes, a way for you to play it offline. So when the game inevitably, let's be real, does close down in terms of the online services, how we see a lot of these companies close down and move on, there will still be a way, it seems, to play it. Now you can switch between the two different modes and it'll sign you off and do a few things behind the scenes, but effectively there is a way to be able to play the game offline. That's great news. Again, that's what the whole Stop Killing Games thing has been pushing for, and it does seem like, yes, it is possible with these games. Now, I'm curious if we see this become more of a trend going forward to where maybe it actually is something that happens during the development of the game. They plan for this rather than have to go back and retrofit some of these options to make them playable offline, but certainly a step in the right direction here. Also, it seems like we have some bad news happening right now when it comes to Nagoshi Studios, which we do know that the situation there, NetEase was pulling funding from that game, and it seemed like Gang of Dragons, and it seemed like they still needed another 40 some odd million dollars, Nagoshi Studios, to finish that game. Well, you can see this is over on The Gamer saying Gang of Dragon trailer and Nagoshi Studios YouTube channel vanish amid funding crisis, and with that went all the trailers and some of the stuff they showed off for the game during its initial premiere. Unfortunate, yeah, because this, it doesn't look great, although I will say this, it's possible that the trailers and stuff were removed because there's a lot of branding for NetEase in there, but they also just kind of deleted the YouTube channel, it seems. So again, doesn't look great right here. All right, so I guess the one bright spot here is that the Steam page is still up. So maybe that could also just be a lagging effect to where they haven't actually gotten around to pulling the page down. But yes, where we are right now, just keeping an eye on Gang of Dragons to see if it's even still going to be coming out at this point. Oh, and we just talked about Metal Slug the other day because it seems like the series will continue and we have a new one to look forward to at some point. Well, we had kind of talked about some of the older Metal Slug games, which one maybe to start with, and as I was looking through, wouldn't you know it, there's a pretty big sale going on right now. So if you go over to any of the major platforms, it seems like it's just on sale across the board. And it's like 50 up to 80% off. So here's just a quick snapshot you can see of the PlayStation Store, searching for Metal Slug. And like there's Metal Slug 3, that's the one I had mentioned that I remember starting with. It's $3, 80% off, right? There's the ACA Neo Geo Metal Slug X, that's 50% off, so it's $4. There's just Metal Slug, that's $4, and it just kind of goes on and on and on here. So now more than ever, let people know down in the comments which one they should pick up, although if you pick up almost all of them, it's $20. So that seems like a pretty good deal overall for Metal Slug. Has some awesome like co-op action gameplay you can do there on the couch co-op. What a concept nowadays, right? But hey, Metal Slug on sale. Throw a couple dollars at it, see what you think. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with GameCube and Wii games on the Switch 1. Now, there have been ways, as I've been seeing more and more so online with the homebrew community, for using some of these different emulators on the Switch. But that, from what I've seen, people are like loading Linux and stuff on it now. And I was kind of curious about the idea of, could GameCube games have actually worked on the Switch 1 in its like Horizon OS environment, the native OS that Nintendo has for the system. And it's kind of just been a question that's out there. But now we have our answer because a group has actually been able to make this happen. Now we can see this. This is over on Android Authority. It says Tico's latest release allows GameCube and Wii games to run on the Switch's Horizon OS through custom firmware and eliminating the need to install and reboot into Android or Linux. All right, so this latest alpha build uses a Dolphin core that does automatically boost the Tegra X1 chip to handle demanding titles. It's built on C++, and it has this controller first UI that I will say, they have like screenshots over on the GitHub or on Android Authority here. The UI looks good. It looks actually quite professional, and also has an automatic game library management, so it's really just a zero configuration setup once you get it all running, of course, on your modded Switch. And when I was taking a look and going through the boost mode that they had referenced, what they have to do is like boost the CPU and the GPU quite a bit. Now it does stay within safe limits, but it doesn't really, to me, seem like something that Nintendo would have necessarily done on their end to make this happen. I'm not really sure what the battery life comparisons are when you boost the CPU up that far, but we do know for the most part Nintendo had boosted CPU during load times to cut down on those, but not necessarily just extended play sessions in a game. All right, so this is definitely wading in the territory of heavily customized or custom options here when it comes to the homebrew side. However, as people have been able to load these games up on Horizon OS, they have some results, and it seems like for the most part, a lot of these games are running, we'll say, well. All right, so Luigi's Mansion's been tested, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, Double Dash, Eternal Darkness, Sonic Riders, Super Smash Bros. Melee, and hey, Star Fox Adventures. Hey, shout out to whoever tested that one. And for the most part, they say runs well, but there's always like a caveat to it, like Star Fox Adventures has slow menu and there's stutter in some of the early scenes, specifically when there's shader compilation going on. Again, this is running on Dolphin and it will do that from time to time with different games. Luigi's Mansion, again, menu may be sluggish, same thing with shader compilation, and it requires higher clocks just to boot. So while GameCube games do work, it's not necessarily out of the box, I feel like, with how the Switch one typically is, all right? Like how Nintendo would have had it stock. The Wii, though, is also interesting because games are functioning here, all right? So like Rayman Origins, there were no issues. Muramasa, no issues. Mad World, playable with some minor issues, they say. And Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 just crashes during the first level loading screen. So I've also seen some videos online of people testing this even further, as it does seem like they have other cores that are being dropped in, Sega Saturn being another one, which is kind of interesting. It's just kind of cool to see all these games running natively on Horizon OS for the Switch 1, and I have a feeling there's going to be some other videos coming up here with different tests, so, you know, keep an eye out on the typical, we'll say, emulation channels out there. But I don't know, kind of cool just to see that question at least answered or maybe explored here, as this is still very early on in their alpha build of Tico. I mean, it's just impressive stuff what the homebrew community is able to accomplish here, getting GameCube and Wii games running natively without needing to tap Android or Linux on the Switch 1. Next up, let's talk about Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced. It's been one of the worst kept secrets, especially coming out of Ubisoft at this point, although Ubisoft stuff tends to leak, like constantly, so I guess it's not really that surprising. Still, though, we had our first look at it, official look at it, and the game looks pretty awesome, I will say. Now, for many people out there, it's one of the top Assassin's Creed games. Usually look at that and Assassin's Creed 2. Those are typically the ones that people throw around as their favorite Assassin's Creed games. So I'm glad, at least from initial glance here, doesn't seem like Ubisoft did too much necessarily, or tried to mess it up or anything like that, which is something that fans were concerned about. But we can see some of the trailer here that they released, the first look at the game, and it does come out July 9th. All right, so not too far off, actually, less than, it's like 2.5 months from now. It's out on the PS5, the Xbox, and the PC. There is no Switch 2 version at this time. People were asking about it, what's going on, and it's Ubisoft. It'll probably come, 6 months later or something. Maybe before the end of the year, they'll get it out just in time for holiday season. But still, though, we do have this coming out on other current platforms, and it is built on the latest Anvil engine. It will not be an RPG. That's something else people were a little concerned about. Are they going to take liberties and kind of turn this into some of the other mainline Assassin's Creed titles that aren't for everyone when it comes to some of the RPG elements? Not the case here. And as they were showing it off, I will say, I think it looks very good visually, and there was some back and forth about this on social media, specifically because it doesn't look as yellow. And I think people tend to forget the 360 and PS3 era had like this yellow filter over a lot of games, and I think most of us realize it was just kind of the limitations of the hardware back then, and that yellow-brown filter worked to cover up some of the visual deficiencies, especially on characters and environments. So I do not mind that they went ahead and lifted that filter on this, all right? And it does have a dynamic weather system as well, same day-night system they were showing off, so it looks like it's just a more like the world looks more alive than what we had. Of course, you'd expect them back on the 360 in 2013, and then eventually it did come out on the PS4, of course, and the Xbox One. Combat, much faster, much more fluid. They were showing this off in action, and yes, it looked like you were able to react and move around much, much better, which is great. Again, that era of Assassin's Creed people look back on, and the combat isn't always the first thing that comes to mind in that game. That was sort of like a perfect parry. The parkour movement is much improved as they were showing off, and again, there's been a lot of... They made a lot of improvements in the parkour side from 2013 to now, so it makes sense that they would implement that here in the Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced version. You can also crouch freely. Yeah, that was a thing too. So you can approach targets in stealth that way, which is cool. And one of the more annoying things back then for Assassin's Creed was when you would fail certain tailing missions, it was over. Like instant failure when you were spotted, and that was it. However, here, if you do eavesdropping missions or you got to follow some of the targets around, they've reworked it to where it's not an instant failure. You will just have to then react and change your strategy depending on what your target is doing. Of course, when they spot you, maybe hiding or I guess just taking them out. And then to finish up, they did show ship combat, and it looks great. I mean, that was always the thing that stood out, of course, about Assassin's Creed Black Flag, is it was a lot of fun to sail the high seas and battle it out with some different ships, jump off yours, board theirs, and take over. So, I mean, as a pirate game, that's what you'd expect to do, and it was a lot of fun, and the upgraded visuals here just make that look even better. So I am fully on board. I'm very excited for Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced, and I'm looking forward to it to start off July, and it's just another big game for 2026, and I know we say this about a bunch, like every year it seems like we're saying that more and more now, and I think it's just because there are so many games that come out, but I'm getting a good feeling right now about 2026. I think we're gonna, of course, see more and more games get announced, but I'm thinking this is gonna be a pretty strong year once again, and this is just another game to kind of throw in the hopper. This one, though, for the summertime, so looking forward to it. Next up, let's talk about AI in games, because this is something that will be coming up more and more, depending on a studio's actually want to tell you about it. And remember, I mentioned this a while ago. I said a lot of studios I think are going to be using AI and just not tell you about it. You won't find out until years later after the game's shipped. And now we're hearing about that a bit more from, well, someone at Google. So you can see. Now this is over on VGC. They say in an interview with mobilegamer.biz, Google Cloud's global director for games, Jack Buser, said a lot of studios use AI-powered tools to help with development, but a number of them are unwilling to confirm this publicly for fear of backlash, saying, quote, "I think what players don't realize is that their favorite games right now were already built with AI. Those games have shipped. We did a survey around Gamescom last summer with studios all over the world. Roughly 9 out of 10 game developers told us, yeah, we're using it. Now you'll see other surveys from other organizations that have had more around 40 to 50%. You might ask yourself, well, that's still a large number. It's almost half of the developers out there. What's that gap? And that gap is basically the developer's willingness to tell you whether the fact of the matter is it's being used. Now, check this out. He goes on to say in the interview that Capcom is an example of a company that uses Google's AI tools in development, claiming it uses them to make less important assets so it can focus its creativity on the main aspects of the game. And I mean, this kind of came up during the DLSS situation, right? Where they were showing off the new DLSS version with the Instagram filter, and Capcom was right there front and center, and people seemed confused, even developers within Capcom apparently, and it's because they had such a staunch push against generative AI being used in their games. But then here's somebody at Google saying, oh no, yeah, Capcom, they use it internally. And here's the thing. First off, the source clearly at Google, who is trying to a lot of these companies trying to will AI into existence of just everyday life. You know, if you search for something on Google, you're using AI because it just says, don't worry, we're going to run this through our Gemini system. You know, we'll just do it for you. So it's like if you just search nowadays for something, you're using AI. So of course they do want to paint it in the best light possible and say, hey, everyone's 9 out of 10 developers are using AI right now. And I don't know if that's actually the case. It's 9 out of 10. I do think it's a majority right now though. And I just don't think they're going to tell you as they're saying here. And sure, it's probably, some of them are just tools of, let's do some research, help me out as just an advanced search engine. That doesn't shock me to hear that. I think a lot of people actually are using it in that way. It more so comes down to, hey, I need to paint this scene for this level, and you're just going to generate all the art assets, the character models, everything for me right here. Like, I don't have to do any of that work, and essentially replacing artists and kind of the human touch to that part of the game. That's where it becomes more problematic. But at least for now, it sounds like Capcom, if they are using it, it's, oh yeah, they're using it for less important aspects, maybe concept art. That's another big one. So yes, just assume, I would say, just assume at this point, many of the games that you're seeing coming out have at least had ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini used in some sort of support role, maybe research, maybe concept art. But I would assume most of them are using it, yes. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about the Famitsu sales charts. That is giving us our first look at the opening week sales for Tomodachi Life, and we can see. Now this is over on Install Base Forum. It has it nice and lined up here for us. The top 10 with, yes, Tomodachi Life, Living the Dream, number 1, 565,405 copies. These, by the way, are just the physical copies, so I'm not really sure what the digital split would have been on this one, since it's not a game key card or anything. It's just on the Switch 1. Again, we'll hear from Nintendo eventually about this game. But big opening there for Tomodachi Life. Ahead of, I think ahead of Pacopia. I think ahead of the last Tomodachi Life that released on the 3DS. So that's pretty solid there. Right below that, we do have Pragmata on the PS5. 36,470 copies. Not a bad opening there, I'd say, for a new IP out of Capcom. Then we have Pokemon Pacopia number 2, 19,000 units. By the way, coming up on 1 million copies sold for Pokemon Pacopia physical, just outright in Japan. Impressive stuff there. Then we have Mario Kart World, Minecraft on the Switch, Animal Crossing New Horizons. We have Doraemon at number 7, Animal Crossing New Horizons for the Switch 2 at 8, then Nintendo Switch Sports, and Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green. Those are like the download cards they sell, rounding out the top 10. Moving over to the hardware, the Switch 2 is at the top, 44,280 units. That is technically down from the previous week, and I think it's because of, believe it or not, Tomodachi Life, since if you look right below that, the Switch 1, 31,496. That is a pretty significant jump of about 50% from the week before, because Tomodachi Life, you can just play on the Switch 1. So I'm sure there are plenty of people who are like, oh, I'll just get a Switch 1 to play this thing. And that's the thing, Tomodachi Life just happened to push the last generation system, and it does still make me wonder about the Switch 1's chances at getting to, say, 160 million units. I think it's going to come down to, at this point, maybe Nintendo just manufacturing that long enough, because it's just, in Japan, I mean, it's slowed down, but not to a degree that you'd expect with the next system on the market with the Switch 2. Right below that, though, we do have the PS5, 10,730 units. That is up a little bit from the previous week. We could, I guess, attribute that to Pragmata. Why not? And then we have the Xbox Series coming in at 454 units. So yes, Tomodachi Life off to a very strong start here, so much so that it's pushing last generation hardware, but it was kind of expected that Tomodachi Life would do very, very well out of the gate, and I actually do expect it to reach about 10 million units or so minimum on the Switch and the Switch 2 going forward. On the 3DS, it was like 7 million or so units that had sold there. That was pretty good, I'd say. About, 10% or so attach rate for that install size. If it gets to that for the Switch 1 minimum, it'll be like 15 to 16 million units sold. So yeah, I think it's going to do very, very well going forward. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, do you use AI? So ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, any of them really. Let's see, we have 39% say yes, I've used it before, but not often. 34% say no, I've never used any of it before. And then 27% say yes, I use it frequently. Okay, so I've been curious about this in a number of different ways, whether it's just recreational use or just kind of asking it questions, researching, learning, even coding. But you know what I'm really curious about? In different workplaces, if you work in an office or like a big corporation somewhere in you know, the cubicle, or I don't know, the open workspace or whatever now, if people are being leaned on a bit to use these tools more so than before, like, hey, are you using Claude? You should be, because it'll make you more productive then. I'm curious if it's kind of getting pushed on people right now from management or supervisors. The thing I am interested in, because like ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini, sure, but the thing I've been really interested in is more like the local language, like actually running one on your own machine that's not tethered to one of these big tech companies that's developing this stuff. I've been very curious about that, but whenever I look up the requirements for running one well that's not just like really dumb, the amount of VRAM or unified RAM that you need is like, it's insane. So I'm not curious enough to invest a crazy amount of money to do it, but it is something maybe they get to a position where they are just much more efficient. You don't need as much VRAM or unified RAM. I'd be interested just to see what it could do on like the local network, on like a PC that I have set up to the side. What can like a local language model do? Just kind of play around with it and see what's possible. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as we're seeing here. This is from Censure, who says, can't wait for Sony to ask me to verify my age on a 20-year-old PSN account. Yeah, that's the thing. You assume that if they know that you set your account up more than 18 years ago, you're probably at least 18 at that point. And especially if you had a credit card attached to it the whole time, or you bought something 17 years ago, or like to me, it should be pretty obvious at that time that you are just old enough to not even require an ID or a phone number. I mean, I guess a phone number is, you'd probably want that attached anyway for a credit card being used. To me, it's also kind of strange that if you attach a credit card that has that same name, so you have your full name there on the account, and then you also have a credit card that has your name on it. Again, that kind of lines up to me for verification on its own. The whole verification thing getting pushed, there's so many questions around how necessary it really is, like, and because all the information, of course, being gathered and then stored on some of these servers by these companies that you're already kind of concerned. How secure are they really with all the stuff going around about data breaches? And it's just, do we really need this for video game stuff? Apparently they say you do, even if your account is old enough to rent a car. And ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed yesterday's Newswave, I'll leave it up here in a card. Or maybe you wanted to see how 10-year-old technology can deal with newer emulation for things like the PS2 and the GameCube. I did a whole video looking into that, and I'll leave it right below. Thanks guys for watching. Have a great weekend. I'll see you back here Monday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern time for Newswave.